Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Sustainability Shorts, our quick fire interview series ahead of Climate Week NYC. Today, we're with PwC, where they're telling us all about how they are taking action on climate risk ahead of Climate Week NYC. We're joined by Emma Cox, PwC's Global Climate Leader, and Bethan Grillo, Managing Director in PwC's Global Corporate Sustainability Team. Hello to you both, and thank you for joining us.
Hi there, Angela.
Emma, let's start with you. Can you tell us how PwC really thinks about climate risk?
Thanks very much, Angela, and it's great to be here and to be talking about this important subject. I think we've focused a lot on mitigation, so taking action towards a net zero world, but we know that we're not moving fast enough. So it's really important to also think about how climate risk is impacting us. And at PwC, we're really conscious of that. So every day we're seeing how different parts of the world are being impacted, whether that's the floods in Brazil or the extreme heat that we're seeing in India and Pakistan, or the wildfires that are currently starting up in Europe and in California. The impacts of climate change are really hitting home to people. And yet there's not enough awareness in business necessarily about how climate risks may impact. And there's not enough being done to really address the need to become more resilient and to adapt, because like it or not, we've got to live with these impacts of climate change whilst we're taking action on mitigation. And the impacts are large, right? So whether that's $380 billion worth of climate-related losses suffered last year, or the expectation that it could be $10 to $12 trillion of impact by 2050, this is really important to both understand and then to adapt to. So at PwC, we're thinking about it for ourselves, how that impacts on us as a business. We're thinking about how we can help our clients understand the risks and opportunities they face. And we're also working with broader society and stakeholders to take part in those collaborative actions that are needed.
Thank you, Emma. Now let's dig a little deeper into what PwC is doing around its own operations. Bethan, what are the immediate climate risks you face as an organization, and what are you doing today to minimize them?
So we actually analysed to what extent our hundreds of offices worldwide are likely to be exposed to climate hazards such as drought and extreme heat by 2050. And we found that some of our offices may face up to 200 days a year of extreme temperatures. So as I'm sure you can imagine, that painted a really stark picture that no doubt galvanized action. It also provided really helpful data insights that were internalized by our teams, by our leaders, to be able to plan their own responses to the data that they were seeing. I think it also played a really interesting role, actually, in also helping to dispel some of the misunderstandings that persist around the impacts of climate change, so that they will be felt in the distant future, that they will be felt elsewhere, that they'll be felt by other types of businesses. So one of the reasons actually for us publishing the highlights of our climate risks was in part to encourage other companies to examine theirs too. Some of the actions we've taken as a result of assessing our climate risk include establishing a community of climate risk leaders. So they are responsible for overseeing their own climate analysis at a local level. So working with different stakeholders within their business to put really sensible adaptation measures in place. We're also working with business critical suppliers so we can understand their physical risk and adaptation strategies, because it's by understanding their contingency plans for climate-related events that we can put measures in place that in turn reduce the risk to our own business. We have security and business continuity teams right across our global network, and they're planning for any increase in the frequency and intensity of climate hazards. They're tracking those. They're responsible for the security of our people all over the world. So they regularly share climate alerts and intelligence with our people so they can prepare, so they can respond. And finally, we've also embedded climate within our network risk management framework too.
I love all those steps. And, you know, I know you work so closely with businesses across the world. Emma, can you tell us a bit more about the actions that you think businesses can and should be taking today to adapt to a warming world, a changing climate?
Yes, thank you, Angela. And the good news is it doesn't take rocket science to get started here to think about what's needed on adaptation. Now, the devil may be in the detail, but what we say to businesses is the first step is to think about it, because you're not going to be able to manage what you're not looking at. So first of all, understand where you're exposed and how you can enhance your resilience. So actually assess, as Bethan was explaining about what we've done for PwC, how the impacts of climate risks are going to affect your business. And then think about those steps that you can take to build resilience, both within your own business, but also with your suppliers and the communities who actually form your workforce. Because if your workforce can't get to work, then you're not going to have a factory that's operating, for example. It's not just risk, though. You can also think about opportunities, because in a climate-affected world, we need different products and services. Things may sell into different markets. So how can you actually understand where you can get greater leverage out of your products and services, and where you can actually get new products and services? And then with adaptation and resilience, this isn't about one business being able to solve all the problems. You've got to work with other people. So we're encouraging businesses to understand where they can take part in multi-stakeholder efforts to improve how communities and ecosystems operate. So that might be working with regional, local, or national governments on adaptation strategies, or working with communities and Indigenous leaders to contribute to localized action, and listening also to what local solutions actually exist and how they might be able to adapt and use them in their businesses. That's just a few examples. Often we find that businesses are doing more than they actually are aware of. They're just not categorizing it necessarily as adaptation or resilience. One other blocker sometimes to action is that it's somebody else's problem. So by taking this kind of stepped approach, they can understand what are the levers within their control and where can they look to others. Looking at finance sources is another big opportunity, if you like. We need much more finance to flow towards adaptation. So working with businesses in the financial system to understand how there are opportunities for them to provide adaptation finance to the types of projects that I've just been talking about is another opportunity area.
Amazing. And, we've talked so much about the actions around climate adaptation. I think it's also important to touch on mitigation. And we need to absolutely speed up those efforts to decarbonize the economy and reach net zero. Bethan, can you tell us a little bit about what PwC is doing in that space?
Sure. So I completely agree. There's no doubt that we need to speed up decarbonisation to reach net zero. There's tremendous progress taking place, but it's just not happening at the pace and scale necessary to address the problem that we're seeing in overall terms. So actually, in our own net zero economy index, we saw that year on year, the year-on-year decarbonisation rate needs to happen 12 times faster than the global average over the past 2 decades. So the challenge is really clear. Within PwC, we have set near-term science-based targets. We did so. We made a commitment to net zero in 2020. Our SBTs have been validated by the SBTi and are aligned to a 1.5 degree climate scenario. We actually published our first climate transition plan last year, which outlines the actions that we're taking to decarbonize our own business, but also the broader role that we're taking to try and accelerate the overall transition of the economy. As you would expect, we're working very closely with our clients to try and also accelerate that transition, to support them on their own journeys towards net zero. And we're adapting our core services to really build and scale the support that we're able to provide. Our focus, again, as you would expect, is absolutely on Scope 3 within the overall commitment that we've made. So reducing our business travel emissions, but also working really closely with our suppliers, because it's so important to send that pulse through the economy and to encourage our suppliers to also set their own targets to reduce their own climate impact in order to get that multiplier effect, in order to speed things up and to try and achieve the level of change that we all know is necessary. Underpinning all of that, there's no doubt that data is absolutely key. So we really need that granular data to inform what we do, when we do it, how we do it. But alongside that data exercise, It's been integral to make sure that we've been able to upskill our people within the business and also build capacity to be able to address the issues that we're facing. But perhaps if I step back and almost return to where I started, the measures that are shifting economic and business activities in certain areas show exactly how progress can be accelerated to deliver a remarkable impact. But they absolutely need to be pervasive. So we need to scale the change to all sectors, to all economies. And in order to do that, we need much more extensive collaboration between business and government that act in the common interest to help solve the climate problem, which is, of course, absolutely one of the most pressing, if not the most pressing issue of our time.
Could not be said better, and an excellent way to end this. Thank you so much, Bethan. Thank you, Emma, for joining us today and for those incredible insights. Really, really appreciate you both. We're thrilled to have PwC as our headline partner for Climate Week NYC this summer. If you want to get more insights like the ones you've just heard, get involved with the conversation at Climate Week NYC, September the 22nd through the 29th. And in the meantime, please stay tuned for more content. Thank you for watching.